Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Tara training session. Today, we're going to discuss the very first step of the TARA process, called item definition according to ISO 21434. If we clearly understand item definition, it will make cybersecurity risk analysis and management much easier and more accurate. Now, let's dive in and learn exactly what item definition is. According to Clause 9 of ISO 21434, the objective of item definition is very clear. We need to define three main points. First, clearly describe the item itself. Second, describe the operational environment where the item functions. And third, explain how the item interacts with this environment. In ISO 21434, an item is defined as a component or set of components that implements a function at the vehicle level. Remember, not every component is an item. Only systems performing essential vehicle-level functions are considered items. To help you understand better, let's look at three examples. The first example is the adaptive cruise control system. It automatically maintains the vehicle's speed and the distance to the car ahead. The second is the electric parking brake system. This system automatically applies or releases the parking brake based on driver input or vehicle conditions. The third example is the CAN transceiver IC. This small semiconductor chip supports communication between ECUs in the vehicle via CAN network. Now here's a question for you. Which one of these examples is considered an item according to ISO 21434? Think about it briefly. All right, let's check the correct answers. First, the adaptive cruise control system is definitely an item. Why? Because it directly performs a critical vehicle-level function controlling speed and maintaining safe distances. The second, the electric parking brake system, is also an item. It manages another essential vehicle-level function activating the parking brake. However, the third example, the CAN transceiver IC, is not an item. Why not? Because it doesn't directly provide a vehicle-level function on its own. Instead, it supports communication, which makes it a component, not an item. So, please remember clearly, an item must directly implement a meaningful vehicle-level function. When defining an item, ISO 21434 requires you to provide three critical pieces of information. The first one is the item boundary. This tells you clearly where the item starts and ends. It also describes which systems it connects to. The second is item functions. You must clearly describe exactly what the item does, its intended behaviors, and how these functions appear throughout its life cycle: development, testing, production, operation, and maintenance. Third, define the preliminary architecture. Describe clearly what components make up the item, how they're connected, and identify any external interfaces involved. These three elements form the foundation of a good item definition. There are additional important points to consider when defining an item. First, remember that the item boundary you define for cybersecurity might differ from the one used in other disciplines, like functional safety. Keep this in mind clearly. Also, constraints and applicable cybersecurity standards must always be considered during item definition. Additionally, there might be cases where you define an item without a specific context, known as out-of-context development. In this situation, you can use an assumed or generic item definition. Finally, describing the operational environment clearly is crucial. This information is highly valuable for identifying threat scenarios and analyzing risks in the next steps of the TARA PROSO. Let's look at a specific example provided by ISO 21434. This example is the headlamp system of a vehicle. This system turns headlamps on or off based on driver input. Also, if the high beams are on, it automatically switches to low beams when it detects an oncoming vehicle, returning to high beams afterward. These item functions are clearly described, along with a precise definition of the item boundary, showing it operates independently of the navigation ECU and gateway ECU. The preliminary architecture also clearly shows how components inside the headlamp system are interconnected. This is a very clear and practical example of how an item definition should look. Finally, let's see how to define the operational environment for this example. The headlamp system connects to the gateway ECU, and the gateway ECU connects to the navigation ECU. The navigation ECU has external communication interfaces, such as Bluetooth and cellular networks. There is also an important assumption here. The navigation ECU includes a firewall to prevent unauthorized external communication. The gateway ECU also has external communication via OBD2 and is assumed to have robust cybersecurity protections, including firewall functions developed to a high security level called CAL4. Clearly defining the operational environment like this helps us understand potential threats and attack paths, which is essential for the upcoming Terra steps. Thank you for joining this session. This completes our clear and detailed introduction to item definition in Terra.